Is that better? Yes, good. Right. Uh, this wound up in my possession. You should hold on to that. Your pupils are something.
Pupils?
Those individuals writing for you?
I don't think you understand.
Nevertheless, it appears they wrote that.
I don't think they did. I'm confused. This is just a book that was in my house.
No, you rolling slug. That's approximately how many words they've written over the course of Shoutout Saturday.
Oh, oh. I mean, that's a whole novella.
That's exactly what that is. Make sure you put it away. Tomes should be treated with respect. I must be getting back to Zyclus University. Carry on with whatever it is you do in this stale room.
That's right. You heard that right. This this book, this cute little fantasy book, this is a fantastic little wholesome book dealing with dragons by Patricia C. Reed. I read this a couple times growing up as a kid, actually. We've written about the same amount as this book. That actually excludes me, and it's really only 3 to 4 of our people in the server really that have contributed most of the words. But over the course of 15 weeks, the community has written 46,000 words. That's pretty close to this book. That is a whole novella. You could adequately call that a novella. That's a lot of writing in what's basically less than 4 months of time. That's crazy. Awesome job, everybody. I'd love to just kind of congratulate the whole community. This is super crazy. I wouldn't have imagined we would have had this much community writing and world building by this point already. The community hasn't even hit 100 people in the Discord, and with Discords, it's way less people that are actually active, and so that's kind of an insane number. And that's only Shoutout Saturday. I only counted Shoutout Saturdays. I did ensure to use some programs to count the words in images as well. So people who posted images, your words were included. Don't worry about that. But there's a lot of other world building in the server that has not been word counted. I'm going to work on a Discord bot soon to count words in the server so that people can kind of compete with one another and see how many words they've written or at least have posted in the server itself. But otherwise, let's get to some really awesome lore. This is the last 4 weeks. This is Shadow Saturday 12 through 15. And let's have a blast listening to some awesome lore. Thanks so much. For Shoutout Saturday, day 153, the prompt was describe a painting of a great historical moment and how accurate or inaccurate the painting is in relation to the events that took place. This came from Sun Panda in the Discord. For day 153, Predwin the Great wrote The End of Hensman. While art itself is quite uncommon in the world of Rust and Blood, there are some pieces that have earned a great deal of fame. One such piece is The End of Hensman. This acrylic canvas painting measures 10 feet wide and 15 feet tall. Its frame is made of solid gold, weighing around 80 pounds. The art piece prominently features Hensman kneeling before an abstract entity, likely to be interpreted as the Bleak Shore. This entity is represented as a mass of floating barbed wire and animal carcasses that, interestingly, despite the painting's static nature, always seem to move, if only just a little. Hensman sits kneeling before the entity in front of him, while behind him a group of humanoid silhouettes wield torches and rifles. The event described by the painting is not all too different from what actually happened the day Hensman met his end. The Bleak Shore's avatar was largely consumed by celestial corruption by the time Hensman pleaded for his life, so it could be easy to interpret it as an eldritch form. Hensman, however, never had a chance to kneel before the Bleak Shore, as he was immediately crucified on a pillar of barbed wire and forced to watch the flames of his burning city draw closer. Great Lovecraftian inspiration stuff here. Predwin, I like it. Nugget wrote Emrys Aurelius in the Renaissance. During the Renaissance, Emrys, along with many others, became fascinated by the arts. He painted many scenes of the gods and lost myths associated with them. Many were biased, as Emrys is ultimately a narcissist who slandered the gods' names during the war in the first place, but given mortals' perception of the gods, his first person experience still makes his works a lot more accurate than most. But perhaps the most baffling was the paintings he made of Victor during this time. Victor isn't around a lot of the time, and Emrys often misses looking at his face. It made things very interesting a few centuries later when historians found an authentic Renaissance painting depicting a man very clearly dressed to fit in with the 1870s. More interesting still when people began to recognize the painting in question as the same person in vintage photographs from the Victorian era around the same time. I forgot to mention this was an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. If you hadn't gathered that, though, then you probably weren't paying attention because the time travel element seems to be quite clearly represented. Well done, Nugget. We did skip day 154. There were no Shoutout Saturday submissions, but for day 155 we had several, and the prompt was, what is your world's moon or moons like? This was from Kit in the Discord. Aris writes, Moons of Galavan 15 Dancing Twins. Formerly called Galavan 15A and Galavan 15B, the dancing twins of Nojum and Kovis orbit on opposing sides from one another. Both moons are massive in size, most likely causing the odd weather anomaly on Galavan 15. Nojum, named after the god of light Nosinx, is a bright yellow-white moon that can normally only be seen in the night sky. Its twin is Kovas, named after the god of darkness Yonox, a near black moon that absorbs most light shown into it while creating a double shadow on the surface of the planet below where it shines. Before the terraforming of Galavan 15, the two moons had moved in a loop perfectly, never moving too far from one another at any given point in time. But when Null attacked the gods that these moons represent, Yonox's and Nosinx's holds on the moons faltered, causing them to shatter from the core outward. Shards from these moons rained down on the surface of the planet below. The shards of these moons formed large pillars of material, with the most of Nojum's material being on the western half of the planet, and the most of Kovas being on the eastern half. It was said the material from these moons were holy, which is why the planet was colonized to begin with. Now, in the present, temples and shrines made from the shards of these moons can be found all over the surface of Galavan 15, with massive cathedrals carved into the ragged, shattered cliffs of Nojum and Kovas respectively. After the two gods awoke again, these temples were the main source of their power for the longest of times, and was most likely the one thing keeping them alive while they rebuilt themselves. Though the forgotten shaded temples hidden below the casino planet's surface have been rehoused by different deities entirely, but that's a different story for another time. Great stuff. I feel like I'm going to need a long time to figure out Aris's world just because it is, I think, a lot more vast than the rest of ours. Very high scale cosmic stuff, if I remembering correctly. Lots of different planets, lots of different systems, and a lot of like time travel oriented things as well. Very interesting. I'm still currently lost, but that is okay. I think that would be the point if I were only reading it this way anyway. Probably the Great writes, heavy hangs the air. The skies of turmoil have an air of dread in them, a dread that draws one's eyes to two separate blots of rock hanging high in the great blue sky. The moons of turmoil, Hazak and Pales. This sense of dread one feels while staring at the sky is attributed to a form of negative faith associated with the moons, as the history of these hunks of earth is steeped in calamity. See Build Together Day 134. Hazak is the smaller of the two. While there are no precise measurements, it's roughly a 20th of the size of turmoil. Hazak is covered in a deep red soil, broken up with countless strange craters and rivers that have long since dried out. Using a spyglass, one can find the corpses of massive beasts rotting infinitely across the northern plateaus of Hazak, and the signs of forests once being present on the moon. Looking at Hazak for too long causes a sense of bloodlust. The longer one stares at the red moon, the more intense this murderous craving grows, until it cannot be contained any longer. If affected, the Galdathan government recommends barricading oneself away from others for 48 hours, or until your veins no longer feel evil. Pele's is the larger of the two, being around an 18th of the size of Turmoil, or maybe it's just closer. Pele's is covered in solid gold from pole to pole. The corpse of an ancient civilization litters its surface, and weapons larger than cities lay inoperative, facing towards the surface of Turmoil. Looking at Pele's for an extended period of time greatly inflates one's ego. This mental change can get so extreme that all compassion or love the affected person might have had for others completely vanishes. The only cure for this effect is rapid imprisonment and torture until repentance is achieved, at least according to Remexian officials. With Galdatham itself at siege, the air has grown very heavy this day. Perhaps a third eye will look down on turmoil. And you imagine one evil moon is bad, but two evil moons is even worse. But I really like this. Also very eldritch. Sunny the Soap Eater writes Sunny Soul's Journal of the New World. There are several entries in here, and we will start with the third entry. I have only been in this world for a day, and yet the mysteries keep growing in number. I'm stranded in a location, an island of ice. I don't know what the locals would refer to this locale as, neither what country, if any, rules over it. The sun has been stationary in the sky for roughly 20 hours without signs of setting, and alongside this I've made a strange discovery. The horizon, it does not seem to exist. Instead, there is a constant layer of fog that appears if I manage to peer too far. Either that or things grow so distant that natural perception is impossible. I haven't been able to prove the existence of a planet that this world is situated upon, is the point that I'm making, which is awfully abnormal to me. The thing is, though, that's not what I'm writing this journal entry for. I mentioned before that the sun appears stationary. It does not seem to rotate at all, which only seems to muddle the existence of a planet more than before. I had assumed that, because of this, night would exist through an alternative means. Or maybe it just didn't, and the sun existed like some sort of eternal beacon across the lands. Once again, how this would work on a planet befuddles me. It points towards this world not being on a planet, or one half of the planet constantly being dark, neither of which makes sense, since a planet should hold gravitational pull. Therefore, it would rotate, unless someone is interfering with said rotation. But then, what is? None of the locals seem to know or even understand my question about it. I know this isn't what I'm writing about here, but it is still something I need to figure out. It confuses me beyond compare. The thing is, though, I was just proven wrong. Incredibly wrong. There's no moon or anything here, but that means, yes, there's no light at all at night. I'm only writing this in thanks to a campfire I had built earlier in the day, otherwise I would be out of luck. That's not to mention just how day turned to night either. It was a serpent in shape, a serpent which came from the endless horizon. I don't know from where, and it reminded me of a common world rainbow in that sense. But everything else about it, horrifying. It was large enough to make the sun. The sun seemed like some sort of largish boulder, and yes, that might sound impressive, but that's until you realize just how large this thing was in comparison to the bloody sun. Thing is, it ate it. The serpent, it ate the sun. That's how night fell. There is no sun. It ate the sun. How did it? I don't understand, frankly enough. It's a predator so large that can feast on the literal sun. How did such a thing come to be? I'll investigate further at another date. For now, I have to survive the night. Sunny Sewell's Journal of the New World, 4th entry. The sun has returned, but the serpent is nowhere to be seen. The night lasted for roughly 15 hours, maybe a little longer. I must imagine that the day to night cycle is rather inconsistent if it is dependent on this serpent, whatever it is. I went to the local village in any case, asked around. They all tilted their heads, told me that this happens every night, as I suspected. I suppose the confusion is understandable. If this happens every night, then surely everybody knows about it. Someone who doesn't would be an outcast. The strange part to me, however, was the fact that nobody exactly knew about it. I was told about certain myths and religious tales, but nobody really knew much. I would need to talk to a more knowledgeable individual for such details, I suppose. Fair enough, but that means I should be getting off this island. I have an idea as to where to head next. There's a nearby continent that houses a pretty famous country called the Axtonian Empire. It piqued my interest for a few reasons, primary one being that I had heard the name before. Axton. It's the last name of a guy I knew rather well. Scary person, though he meant well. My sister and his husband, they were pupils of his. Mr. September had a great deal of history with the fella too, but they're on good terms nowadays. Thing is, you see, I inquired about his name, about Rave. The people of the village acted shocked, like I had said something I shouldn't have. The elder came up to me, invited me to his house. We spoke a little. I found out that Rave was a legendary king from that very empire. Only solidified my suspicion more so, and the guy sounded awfully cryptic in nature. Nobody really knew what he was up to, only that he signed this deal with some guy called the Aurora King or Frost King from the neighboring Divine Kingdom. Then he helped out the frost demons that lived on this isle, and yeah, demons, you heard that right. Demons exist here apparently, but they don't seem all that bad. Whatever, I got interesting news, and the elder even gave me a small ship to use, so now I'm heading for Axtonia. Another update once I'm there, maybe. Sunny Sewell's Journal of the New World, 5th entry. Really need a better name for this journal. Not bothered with it right now, though, so it can wait. Whatever the case, I spent the day sailing. Documented some fish I found along the way, the Arctic type. Climate is cold around these parts. It's obvious for the wildlife to be affected. I got to land in 3 hours. Had spent another few chatting to the elder and setting up ship beforehand, so we're probably on hour 8 or 10. I met some surprising folk, was able to analyze them. Weird bit, one of them had my same name. Well, not exactly, but it was close enough. She went by the normal name as an alias, too. Succubus girl, apparently a crisis rank. Strongest person I've met so far, alongside this other fella. Apparently a general of the military, so I decided to ask the two a few questions. Seems that I came off the wrong way, though, so they left without helping me. It was a success on my end, though. I found out a few good things from the conversation. The girl was easy enough to manipulate, seeing as my theory was right. She's identical to me, or well, another version of me. Experiences likely differ, but it makes intel gathering a whole lot easier. I didn't give up much about myself. Went to the local library after. Read up on the Empire's history. Rave was documented in the books alongside this great war. Seemed to be a world war sort of deal, except it was a guy dubbed as the Demon King who was the main enemy of it all. I did find something abnormal, though. Apparently, the moon does exist? Well, not literally, but there's a person out there that embodies it, some sort of supposed divine creature that went across the lands, spreading the light of the moon in absence of the real thing. This seems to be this world's version of a moon, and apparently his descendant is here in Extonia. I've got questions for them, whoever they are. I'm thinking of stopping by a fish and chip shop. I hear there's a good one around, and I got some money from the elder, too. Hopefully I make it before night falls. Ooh, this is another very long one, maybe the longest yet. I really haven't been keeping a tally or record. Maybe I should start doing that. But this is some really interesting stuff, very fun. Nugget writes The Shattered Moon, an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. The moon in Time Traveler and the Immortal is shattered within the night sky. No one knows how or when it happened, but many have theories. Most assume it happened during the Divine War, which makes sense as most of the world was similarly torn apart, and Emrys even claims it was he who shattered the moon, but this isn't actually the case. The moon was one of the first gifts to humanity at the birth of the universe. Stella gave humanity the sun, Time gave the moon. Chaos grew jealous as he knew only how to destroy, but still wanted to give humanity something of his own, eventually giving them an apple tree that gave them the ability to think for themselves. Stella was upset about Chaos corrupting her otherwise perfect humans and convinced them to try and kill Time, knowing that Time held power over Chaos. To everyone's surprise, Time didn't do anything. He just stood there and let Chaos fatally wound him, and in doing so the moon, as an extension of its creator, shattered. This is some cool stuff. I see your inspiration from our own mythology, a very classic Christian mythology, which I think is super interesting. I like the way that you've incorporated this with your own stuff. Like it. Very cool. Nice job. On day 156, the prompt was, what is a famous or common conspiracy theory in your world? Is it correct? MycoMan writes the beginning, the ending, everything. I often find humor in my day-to-day travels to the best of my ability. Today was a day where the humors of life brought out my natural curiosity. I was in Chrysalis today and overheard a conversation between a human and Goliath, an argument. Kresvi, Skroniman, you are no better than me simply for who you are. Kresvi is a way in Goliath dialect to tell someone that they're incorrect and unintelligent. Fun fact, the letter C doesn't exist in Goliath culture. The human retorted back, it isn't my fault we were the first made race giantkin. Keep your trap shut. I didn't hear much of the conversation, just that snippet. The Goliath quickly handled the human male after that statement. It made me wonder, though, who did come first? I decided to find out through the firstborn, which is a title used to describe the three-head gods of Hrot-Tavi, Nemoe, and Ernor. Off I go. I haven't spoken to the three much. Most people don't really see Ernor anymore, not after his incident with Nemoe and Hrot-Tavi anyway. I suppose I should briefly discuss it here since I haven't yet made an entry on it. Ernor is a special god. They call him the World Crafter, or Realm Builder. Usually, whenever any god makes their realm, Ernor has a part in its creation or construction. He also seems to have an issue with perfectionism based on this myth. Apparently, he sees his work as less than great, and at one point he asked Nemoe to help him. Nemoe flat out refused. Not seeing any issues with him. He didn't give him any support or actively tried to help him get better. Aonor took it at face value. From then on, he believed he didn't deserve the help he was asking for. Now, people haven't heard or seen him for many cycles. I wonder if he's doing okay. New realms pop up, which I assume he helps make, but that doesn't mean he's doing better. With how efficiently and quickly they're being made, well, I'm afraid he's getting worse. I digress, though. Back to the task at hand. I've never visited Nemoe's realm before. According to part of god law, each god is meant to, in some way or another, inhabit their realm. Kaz in Chrysalis lives in a monastery of the Elskamir monks, hiding as one of the Furbolg members. Hemek in Kragus lives at the center of the fourth layer. Nemoe, since I haven't been to his realm before, I don't even know where he'll be at. I hope my journey to find him is short. Hopefully I did an okay job with the Goliath. I actually don't remember if the Goliaths had a Russian origin, but it just felt right, so we went with a little bit of a Slavic accent. I tried my best. Let me know what you think. Nugget writes, magic isn't real, an entry in The Time Traveler and the Immortal. The gods are something that is just known to exist. They may be disliked, and they may be dead, but the fact that they exist is not up for debate. Unless you're Victor, anyway. While his family is famous for being witch finders, Victor adamantly denies the existence of the gods and magic. He values a scientific outlook on life, and magic simply isn't scientific. Of course, he's wrong, and deep down he knows this. Victor has unexplained magic in a family of witch finders. His obsession with science was something of a coping mechanism. If magic doesn't exist, then how could he have it? And if he doesn't have it, then he can't be persecuted. This is the final build together prompt I will read. I'm going to be gone the next few days, and so I'm not going to unfortunately be able to get to the rest of the prompts that come out the day that I am reading this, but that is okay. I will get back to those when I am here in person next week on Friday. So finally, we have Predwin the Great for day 156. Kamar, first and last chance. The hordes of orcs are endless. The legions of Murakane do not die, and the tide of Korgans does not falter. Kamar is lucky enough to have as few entry points as it does. Orcs die in the thousands every day. Murakanians are brought to gas chambers where their corpses are burnt forever, and daemons are banished again and again. Kamar holds its own against an infinite enemy, a battle of attrition that has no clear end in sight, though both sides have dealt serious blows to one another. Now, imagine that instead of Kamar, the forces of death chose another target for their first war. The Kartoff are scattered, and cannot fight a war of attrition. Havenhold is but a single city with only so many guns. Arcadia, though mighty as it is small. The adamantine court, greatest of automations, would crumble as the tide of death wrought horror over its land. Armdao would die afraid, the miasma returning for its final toll, the ram sights like dominoes, that as they fall would break the morale of every man and woman under the rule of the seven saints. Many scholars believe the above information to be absolutely true. They believe that if mortal kind is to find success in this conflict, then Kamar must not fall. They believe that the forces of death know the above information as well, and that Kamar was chosen purely because attacking another country would have given them far too much time to prepare themselves. This conspiracy, as well informed as it is only that, a conspiracy. A conspiracy. There is no need to think such terrifying thoughts. Pace thyself, mortal. Very cool stuff, Predwin. Lots of eldritch horror and Lovecraftian elements coming through in your writing lately, which I dig. I'm a big fan. I love cosmic horror, cosmic entities, cosmic ideas like this. Super cool. This is Shoutout Saturday number 13, and we're going to start with day number 158, where the prompt was, are there any franchises in your world? If no, why not? If yes, describe one that is well known. Predwin the Great starts with Calico Arms. Calico Arms is a Nyan-run company stationed in Havenhold that is almost solely responsible for the distribution of weapons in Grala. Calico Arms have been around for a long time, around 120 years, making all sorts of revised, engineered weapons from the Far Empire. Possibly their most famous weapon, the Calico Arms Purge Gun, is essentially a gargantuan Gatling gun with an immense fire rate of 25,000 rounds per minute, the fastest of any firearm in turmoil. The employees of Calico Arms are well known for their sunny disposition despite the nature of their work. For day 159, we have the prompt, is there a specific weapon that has grown very popular throughout your world? This comes from Predwin the Great. Predwin the Great writes, Blasbruke Heavy Anti-Dragon Rifle. The Blasbruke Halan for snipe gun is a very popular line of low-production heavy rifles made in the forward city of Grithgo Dako Nothdindok. Blasbruke were once used to decimate the local dragon population of Kamar. Their ability to knock adult dragons out of the sky in a single round, if placed properly, was well renowned within Caldatha, to the point that so many people believed in the power of the rifle so much that the firepower was artificially increased by the power of the faith font. Nowadays, the Blasbruka is a rare sight on the battlefield, used to annihilate powerful opponents like ogres, medial demons, or arch cultists. The Blasbruka has time and time again proven to be an effective tool of war in the Kamar fronts and has earned a reputable degree of fame, making it immensely popular despite its low count compared to other rifles. For day 160, the prompt was, what is the reason or backstory behind why a specific law is in place in your world? And this comes from Nugget in the Discord. Bruin the Great writes, the right to hate. Remexia has a history full of conflict, arguably more than any other faction. It is a broken country that stands with the help of one word, hate. To hate is to be pure, to be righteous, to be correct. Remexia, over time, has brainwashed its citizens into hating any other lineage. Elves, dwarves, lizard folk, all of them are to be hated. This law, if broken, is punishable by forced time and the rehallowed legions, where the offender must fight for their right to re-enter Remexian society. Nugget writes the banning of necromancy. I looked out over the sea of corpses that covered the streets. It all happened so quickly. A figure comes up to me, the first other person I've seen in days now. He had platinum blonde hair, blue, almost gray eyes, a hooked nose, and a tired expression. He was dressed in traveler's clothes, adorned with a purple jeweled brooch, and held onto a walking stick in his right hand. Are you going anywhere, stranger? He asked. Where is there to go? Meh, there's a temple south of here people are gathering at. My wife is there already. They say my skills may be needed. People? Yes, if you'd like to come with me, I'm sure you'd be welcome. He looked around at the same gruesome scene I was before he showed up. After all, where else is there to go? I didn't even get your name. Lockhart. Lockhart and I walked for hours, the sun burning at the back of my neck and blood seeping into my shoes as we traveled. We didn't talk much, but of the words exchanged I learned that he was a mage, but didn't particularly like his skill set. He had a wife and a daughter on the way, but they were separated when the world fell apart. He would cough periodically, and I could swear I saw traces of blood lingering on his lips a few times, but something told me I was better off not asking. We made our way deeper into the mountains, and it was only then that Lockhart pulled out a map. He looked at it intently, still quietly coughing as he scanned around for something. Eventually he found it, an entrance to underground corridors or the catacombs, Lockhart said with a soft triumph. He summoned a ball of light with his offhand and began descending the stairs, beckoning me to join him. The catacombs were a maze. Even with Lockhart's map, I can't say how long we spent down there, now that the sun could no longer be used to track time. By the time we emerged, it was night, but the people we found were far more restful. Everyone was working on something, mostly construction it seemed. People were building over top of the temple Lockhart and I had spent so much time trying to reach. I couldn't have been looking around for long, but by the time I looked beside me, Lockhart was gone. I was quickly put to work myself by a woman in religious attire, and I didn't see Lockhart again until morning. It had been well over 24 hours since I last slept, and I barely had any food that night. With the golden light of dawn, I realized that a few of the workers beside me were dead. Well, I'm sure, given circumstances, I don't look the best either, but these were different. Their eyes were too sunken and had no shine. Plenty still had their fatal wounds oozing blood onto the ground. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed, where I saw Lockhart standing within the crowd, his eyes closed in concentration, muttering as he cast. As I watched him, it became clear what he was doing. He was the one reanimating the dead to help build. "Lockhart!" I yelled. "There you are! I've been looking for you!" Lockhart's eyes opened as he turned to look at me. "Ah, you again," he said. "You're a necromancer?" Lockhart lurched, suddenly, coughing heavily as blood spilled from his mouth. "Unfortunately," he croaked, "necromancy is the only school of magic that withers away at the host like this. In order to control the dead, you become something like it. That is the trade-off of the one that decays." "The one that decays? Don't you mean—" "Don't say its name. After everything we've gone through, do you really want their attention now?" "No." "Good." Lockhart doubled over in pain, visibly wincing before steadying himself. "We need to work quickly, and the dead need to be cleared from the streets. It's a necessity right now, and the church has promised me a noble title for my work. But rest assured, the ban of necromancy will be the first law I bring up." Lockhart's health got worse as the weeks went on. What started as him simply coughing up blood evolved into black ichor in large quantities. His extremities blackened as if being overtaken by mold, and his veins grew more visible and dark. It was clear to anyone keeping tabs on him that he wasn't doing well and was only getting worse. "I heard the catacombs were getting sealed," I asked the next time I saw Lockhart. "Well, yes, after I move all of the dead down there, I will be cutting off access," he said. "That's how we got here. How would we leave?" "I don't see how that matters. There's nothing out there. I just have a bad feeling." The look on Lockhart's face was that sympathy. "I see. I get where you're coming from. The smell of petrichor is in the air. A storm is on the horizon." "It's just passing rain, isn't it?" "Maybe. One can hope. But one also brings to mind Noah. Personally, I don't think the apocalypse is over yet, and I don't trust the cathedral as the ark." "What happens if it doesn't?" "My bloodline was tainted by the decade long ago. I do not intend for anyone in my family to learn my craft, but should things get dire, I will provide something to be buried with me. Would that give you solace?" "You really think you're going to die?" "We all do eventually, but me especially." Lockhart grew solemn as he spoke. "How many necromancers do you know other than me? How many are older than I?" "I believe you're the first." "Because they die young. I'm only 22, and I doubt I'll see 23. You borrow the decade's magic, and it lures you to its eternal garden all the sooner." "And that's why you want it outlawed?" "Precisely." There was a stiff silence as he let me internalize what he was saying. "We've spoken long enough. I have more I need to get done." And with that he walked away. As I felt the first drops of rain fall from the heavens onto my face, the catacombs were sealed a few days later, and within the month Lockhart was dead. I'm still thinking about his words. I don't think the apocalypse is over yet. The rain hasn't stopped. Great bit of prose and fun narrative writing from Nugget. I enjoyed reading this a lot, giving me a little more context. This is like some historical piece that you've written for the world. Seems pretty cool. I like this a lot. For day 161, the prompt was, "What's a recently discovered slash invented technology in your world? Who was the person to discover slash invent it?" And this was by MycoMan. Bradwin the Great writes, "Sapper drives. A sapper drive is a large, 7-foot tall pillar of mortal steel with various unspecified tech bits beneath its frame. Sapper drives are a preemptive development made, by session, 6 days ago, by one Gideon Rotbrand, a young entrepreneur who received the schematics in a dream. In other words, Ophiax granted him the knowledge without ask of payment. Sapper drives can be used to drastically lower ambient mana levels, which in war can be used to limit the enemies of Kamara's arcane capabilities. While they haven't been fully deployed yet, one was used in close proximity to a captured Scry Sniper for several hours. By the end of the test, the Scry Sniper had lost all meta powers and became a normal person, other than the fanatic belief in a corpse god. Deployment status uncertain. One does not needs and will continue to research possible civilian applications." We're getting some interesting developments in Predwin's lore, it sounds like. I like this idea here. You've got something works like a null sort of in Warhammer, kind of, right? Aren't there blanks or nulls or something? People who nullify the warp around them. This is giving me that vibe. I like this idea a lot. Nugget writes Victor's Watch, and this is a time traveler on the immortal entry. "When Victor was a small child, he was tinkering with something on a bench waiting for his father. An old man he didn't even notice was there began talking about the thrill of invention and how a dear friend of his was an inventor, but he was unfortunately gone now. Seeing potential in Victor, the man gave him a silver pocket watch containing the soul of the god Time. He said it was special, and that his friend would have wanted him to have it. When Victor asked what it was, the man simply laughed and said, "I think any good inventor should enjoy the process of finding that out for themselves." And before Victor could ask anything else, the man was gone. Much like any exposed to a shard of a god's soul, Time's magic began bleeding out and affecting Victor in strange ways. He saw glimpses of the past and future, and was fascinated by the concept of time. He never lost his wonder of invention, and eventually created blueprints to turn his watch into the time machine, unknowingly using Time's soul to power it. Despite the careful planning of it, Victor actually had to put it together under a lot of pressure and haste. The first test didn't go well. He was covered in burns and lacerations upon getting spit back out of the fabric of reality millennia ago, and would have likely died if the show hadn't caught the attention of Emrys Aurelius, who helped cure his wounds. While he managed to stabilize it eventually, it's constantly prone to breaking and malfunctioning, leaving him stranded in certain time periods or sending him to completely random ones. While he was always curious, Victor never actually found out who the old man that gave him the watch was. At least, not until he was sitting on a bench in his old age, in a familiar scene, giving his prized watch to a promising young child who reminded him, a bit too closely, of himself. Cool, classic time travel situation. We have a cyclic story where the origins of a character are that character's story's end. MycoMan writes, "A fair trade, right? Arcane focuses are rather interesting as an invention. To simplify their purpose, they let one focus their magic to lessen the materials required for spellcasting. A focus also can, at times, hold religious purpose, sentimental value, or have other select properties. It's interesting to see how vast these can be. In the realm Aquis, turtles will give themselves special tattoos made using an enchanted ink. They then use these tattoos as a limited time spellcasting focus. Depending on the power of spells and size of the tattoos, these can last anywhere from a few uses to a few years. Recently, I also heard rumor of a group in Scalara attempting to revolutionize arcane focuses. Apparently, they're trying to find a way to let the focus hold extra arcana within it, to let the person magically tied to the focus cast more spells before they need rest. A truly innovating idea. For day 162, the prompt was, "What monsters, beasts, or other creatures can be found in your world? What do people think of them?" And this prompt came from Aris, in the Discord and on TikTok. Percival the Great writes of monsters and men. Turmoil is chock full of all manner of monstrosities, Fulzanax, void suns, light stricken. These creatures have drastically shaped the world and its denizens to the point of entire cultures, e.g., the Kartoff, being forced to take monsters into account in everyday life. One monster, and the people affected by it, that we will discuss today, are the mighty stags. Stags are creatures that form in regions of immense cold. These 15 to 20-foot tall bipedal humanoid monsters that resemble a lanky man with a deer skull for a head are typically most common in Rayonis Gao, where the temperature can be as low as -23 degrees Fahrenheit or -30.5 degrees Celsius. In these temperatures, stags can manifest themselves by possessing the frozen carcasses of animals. If given multiple choices, Rayonian scientists have discovered that stags will prefer possessing the carcasses of corvids, ravens and crows, wolves, vultures, and foxes, over other carcasses like bears, deer, elk, or other winter animals. If given the opportunity to possess a mortal, for example, an executed convict, stags will never possess a mortal carcass unless it is the only visible option to the stag's word. A word is weird, so it's a topic for another day. All this research has been put into stags and how they function to better protect the public of Rayonisgau from the threat these creatures pose. Stags have been a pain in the Rayonians' backside for as long as they've lived in the northern wastes of Kamar. Stags are resistant to most small and medium calibers and can even shrug off a tank round or two before they go down. Although they are rare, every citizen of Rayonisgau is well aware of the danger that stags pose to their way of life. Despite the problems they cause, the Rayonians respect the stags, seeing them as nature spirits that are to be revered and treated well. Stags are rarely ever killed by Rayonians, instead more often appeased with sacrifice, such as cattle being brought to their woods or convicts being sent into their lairs covered in ruins made of burning hot wax. These gifts have greatly reduced the aggression of the stags. Whether or not this is part of a stag's base nature or the effects of the power of faith changing how the monsters behave is unknown. Regardless, Rayonius Gau is fond of their free security system against newcomers that bring war to their lands. I like this. I feel like this is almost written like something out of The Witcher a little bit, like a creature entry in the bestiary there. I dig this a little bit. I don't think I'm 100% accurate in that connection, but it's giving Witcher vibes in a really cool way. Especially it being sort of surrounded by a lot of mysterious folklore aspects, I think is maybe what's giving me that sort of vibe, and it's very compelling. MycoMan writes, "Nature versus nurture. What makes a species adapt to its home? Some say it's the perseverance of the species itself, or its time letting the creatures adapt slowly, but what if there was such a thing as an animal that was neither of those things? A phenomenon amongst animals that continuously popped up everywhere with little to no explanation. Today we'll be talking about boar and boar hounds. Boar are a hyper-adaptive species that were first made and primarily reside in chrysalis. They live amongst the Invash highlands, getting together well with the Eladrin, who live a similar but unique fate to the boar. Boarhounds are a designative name given to boar who have been domesticated over time. In short, all boarhounds are boar, not all boar are boarhounds. According to myth, the boar were first a species of giant, birthed straight from the mountains and into the highlands. Legend says that they were a quadrupedal giant species with furry bodies, large claws. Some even said if one of their kind bit you, you'd turn into one of them. The myth says that when loust shed blood for the bloodgrass, some of it spilled onto some of the boar's ancestors. It granted them the ability of hyperadaptability with the drawback of shrinking and weakening the species. Breaking this down, it appears that whatever ancestors boar had, they gave birth to lichens, mayhaps. I'm unsure of the integrity of the myth, and I haven't gotten the chance to meet Loust yet. Not that I'm sure he'd tell me how true the tale is. From what I hear, Loust is a fan of leaving things up to mystery. That's why most statues made of him in temples don't have any facial features on them. No matter the origin of these interesting creatures, I find them rather adorable. Maybe sometime I'll add in another sub-entry to this one, going into detail on any boar subspecies I find. I remember MycoMan talking about this in the server. I like these little creatures, this idea of some kind of creature with like synchronicity across the different realms, which is the boar. That's fun. For day 163, the prompt was, what's an exotic, expensive food in the rest of the world, but a household meal in a specific place? And this prompt came from Nukes in the Discord. Fredwin the Great writes, Sarada. Sarada is a dish local to the hydrid lakes of Grala, made of freshwater clams and goods traded from Havenhold, specifically wheat and tomato, on rare occasions bones of pigs or cows. The local form of the dish is made by steaming the clams to open them up and removing the meat within. This meat is then stewed with a tomato sauce mixed with various herbs and spices and then mixed with wheat-based noodles. This dish is a simple pleasure that comes rather cheap for the tide takers of the hydrid lakes and is usually made on a bi-weekly basis. The abroad version of sarada is much more lavish, being composed of saltwater clams or mussels, a much more rich tomato broth mixed with bouillons and beef broth, topped with greens like parsley and lemon zest, then served with a fancy splash of olive oil. The noodles used here are usually of finer quality as well, still made of wheat, but sometimes of rice as well. This dish costs around 10 times as much as the local form of the dish. On day 165, the prompt was, how have the events/factors of your world shaped the weapons and armor its occupants use? And this prompt was brought to you by Predwin the Great from the Discord and on TikTok. Predwin the Great writes, over adaptive war fronts. War is, like all other things, subject to evolution. Weapons become stronger, and thus so does the armor they are meant to penetrate. Turmoil is beset by entities beyond the mortal realm, entities that are sometimes beyond the very concept of death. Armor is built to withstand blows from meta combatants that can level buildings. Weapons are constructed to destroy the mortal forms of Murakani and Ark cultists whose bodies are beyond life. Weapons and armor alike are built in an ever-escalating environment to cancel each other out and grow ever more dangerous to nullify the danger of one another. The average soldier, the conscript, the prisoner, the martyr, these men and women are normal, in a place where normal is a city obliterating daemon the size of a bunker is a facet of everyday life. A place where normal is a tank the size of a city teleporting over the horizon and slowly driving your way as thousands of projectiles come to and from its carapace. A place where normal is an ineffective form of war. The only way these people can be useful in the slightest is in the dozens, sometimes hundreds, thrown head first time and time again against the daemon or that tank, until the weight of their corpses crush it or there are no more bodies left to send. War is a cycle. War is a perfect theater, and you will be center stage, mortal. Nugget writes for day 165, The Arcane Weapons of the Witchfinder Army. This is another entry in The Time Traveler and the Immortal. After the War of the Gods, their souls were shattered across the world as their magic bled out in strange ways. While many seek to destroy all remnants of the gods left on Earth, some of the loose magic has been used in weaponry. Ironically, the people most likely to use such arcane weapons are the Witchfinders, as you can't kill a god with mortal weapons. Of course, you wouldn't be able to kill an actual god with these weapons either, but they wouldn't know that. Short and sweet, but interesting and intrigues me for what I don't know here. On day 166, the prompt was, what's a piece of survival advice which is common in your world, i.e., if you see a bear, play dead? Nugget writes, hide from the wind, run from the water. An entry in Petrichor. The windows shook as the wind roared just outside the orphanage in Lower Petrichor. An 8-year-old Edward was sitting against a wall with his brother, Thaddeus, as he practiced reading by candlelight. The hurricane outside shut down the power hours ago now. As fire and sea rise in... Thaddeus leaned over to look at where Edward got stuck. Prestigious, he finished. Merci. Don't mention it. Edward was about to return to the book when his attention was interrupted by a loud crash in the distance. It was an ugly sound, like metal on metal and concrete giving out. What the? Thaddeus exclaimed, looking in vain out the boarded window as if to try and see what caused the sound. Should we be here? Edward said in a quiet concern. What do you mean? Thaddeus said, lingering his gaze at the window before turning back to Edward. Well, aren't people supposed to leave during hurricanes? Weren't people supposed to help us get somewhere safer? Unless they forgot. Are we going to be okay? Edward, Thaddeus, there you are. One of the caregivers came in a panic. We need to get to the roof. The roof? Thaddeus wondered. The wind out there is bending lampposts, and you want us on the roof? It just has to be this way, I'm afraid. We just got word the levees gave out. There's 15 feet of water coming for us. The roof might not be ideal, but it's the best we have to avoid getting flooded. Now put on your coats and get upstairs quickly. Edward and Thaddeus scrambled to their feet to get properly dressed and brace for going outside in the weather. Edward began to notice water crawling across the floorboards, wetting his feet. Thaddeus let out a sudden gasp, once again looking at the window. The water was already high, pressing against it, pouring into the room through the seams. Thaddeus? Thaddeus barely responded, still looking in horror at the window as tears welled in his eyes. We shouldn't be here. Very harrowing. This is a different entry from you, Nugget. I like it. It's a little spooky and ominous, but from a childlike perspective. Very different. So for Shoutout Saturday number 14, we start with day 168. That day's prompt was, what is a lesser known role in a religion in your world? Frederick the Great writes, the Seven Saints. While every government official worth their salt knows about the Seven Saints, as does every citizen of Remexia, the actual job the Seven Saints perform in their religion is completely hidden from the wider public. The Seven Saints, named after the Ramsite they inhabit, e.g., the saint that lives in Fault is called the Saint of Fault, are very important people, obviously, that have complete command over all of Remexia. Each saint is responsible for command over 1/7 each of Remexian population. The number each saint controls is directly tied to one another, as is law decreed by the Saint of Dustdoom. If one saint sacrifices his control over thousands by sending them into a meat grinder, then the number he lost is to be regained by generous donations from the other 6 saints until their statistics are as close to even as possible between one another. As for the role they actually fill within the word Remexia, translated to recognize God, religion, is that of a guide to their subjects. They are here to guide all of humanity and others to the one truth of Ram, and unite all of turmoil against the forces of death. The Seven Saints do not bicker amongst each other, for Ram itself speaks to them, in order to unify them under a single glorious banner of righteous wrath. At least that's what the Exians say. In truth, the Seven Saints are panicking old men who are desperately trying to bring Rom back to them. Rom has, since Hensman's heresy, completely abandoned the mortal realm, instead hiding away in its realm in a depressive state. Rom has completely absconded from its followers, despite their devotion. The Seven Saints constantly bicker amongst one another, trying to bring Rom back to them. They yell at each other during meetings and interfere with one another if they have opposing ideas as to how Ram is to be recalled. These fights have resulted in the loss of thousands of lives. Some saints will go out of their way to reduce a rival saint's numbers just to introduce their own civilians as spies in the saints' ranks. Sabotage is a constant, food shipments being delayed and reinforcements arriving late. The Seven Saints are absolutely pathetic, bickering with one another even when the end of all life is nigh. There's something about this, Predwin, that is more dark than anything else. Maybe because it's too real? I don't know, but I do enjoy this a lot. I feel like I can tell that this is for sure inspired by real life. We've moved away from eldritch things and we've moved towards things that are close to home, but well done. Nugget writes for Day 168, Scholars and Scribes of the Old Religion. This is an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. There's a lot of gods and a lot of stories about them. Because of that, there's people across the world who simply dedicate their lives to studying the gods, memorizing their lore, writing it down, teaching others, and learning more. What they're called differs depending on what part of the world you're in, so I'll simply call them scribes. The work of a scribe is not easy, and is in fact a fool's errand that is doomed to fail. The gods are multifaceted, and different places see different parts of them and interpret them in vastly different ways. Some cultures lack certain information, some theorize incorrectly, but their word still becomes gospel, and with the vastness of the world before modern communication, it's impossible for any scribe to know everything without any contradictions. There's only 2 scribes that would come close. Mors, back when he was alive, was an Egyptian scribe. As one of the first gods created by Stella, she's been there to witness as it happens. but none of their records are within mortal possession or even shared with other gods. The other is Aurelius. As a god born among humans, it's no wonder his entire childhood was wrapped in religion. While other children played, he was memorizing every scripture in the Atlantean library and then some, even being directly tutored by Moors. By the time of the war, Aurelius had the most powerful weapon known to the gods: knowledge. He knew everything about the gods, their powers, their strengths, their weaknesses, their flaws, their connections, everything. Because of this, Aurelius was the most dangerous god in the war, for he knew more about the gods than they knew about themselves. For day 169, the prompt was, what's a children's game commonly played in your world? Aris wrote Torchbearer. The Casrenan species, having grown up on the dunes of Vaxium, found odd ways to keep themselves entertained. One such way is a game often called Torchbearer. There would be two sides. One team guards two or more fire pits, while the other guards the torchbearer. As a side note, Casrena are giant, relatively 20-foot anthromoths. They can fly fairly fast due to how their wings are built. The torchbearer's goal is to light all of the braziers. The defenders are able to take out the torchbearer if they get them to drop the torch onto the ground. If the torch is in the air, anyone on the torchbearer's team can take the torch as long as it doesn't touch the ground. This game originally started as a way for the adults to get the children to light the braziers around their camp. Daytime on Vaxium is normally extremely hot, which is when the Casrenan tribes tend to sleep. Nighttime on Vaxium is effectively the exact opposite, being extremely cold, so this odd game and tradition helps keep the children warm at night if the tribe isn't traveling. Oh, this is super interesting. This is a group I feel like I haven't heard about from you, Aris, yet, and I really like it a lot. Anthropomorphic moths are super cool. I know we have someone else, I believe Carhop in the Discord has something similar. Such a cool idea for a race and a species and a group. And this idea of them using torches and lighting torches is perfect. It's perfect moth stuff. It's great. It's light. It's awesome. Probably the Great writes, Spot the Heretic. The following message is from a propaganda poster typically found in Remexian schools. Have you ever completed a shift at school and wanted to do something religious and fun? Well, boy, do we have the game for you, kiddo. Introducing Catch the Heretic. Catch the Heretic is a fun, interactive puzzle game where you help Remexia in glorious conquest. Ask your designated Exian for the tools you'll need to start this absolutely perfect game of fun. The following message is from the Spot the Heretic Rules and Tips book presented to children by an Exian. So you've decided to undertake the fun, engaging challenge of Catch the Heretic. Good on you for choosing religious fun over rest and relaxation willingly. To start, you'll need three things: a couple sheets of grid paper, a pencil or pen, and a spyglass. Ask a trusted Exian for these awesome tools. Once you have these gadgets, ask your assigned Exian where you should go to best play this fun and inquisitive game. Once you arrive at your play area, ask the man or woman that will also be there where you can start looking for heretics to spot. Once directed, use your spyglass to scan the area, and using skills you've definitely learned from school, mark the heretic's position on your grid paper. Make sure to cover your ears when the man and or woman next to you says, "Fire." If the heretic disappears in a cloud of smoke in your spyglass after the boom, congratulations, you've delivered righteous justice on those who would deny the will of Rom. Keep up the good work, champ. Oh man, this is just, I don't have much to say, but this is pretty well written, Bredwin. That was a fun read. Nugget writes, Rainy Day Fun, an entry in Petrichor. Some brief descriptions of some popular children's activities in Petrichor, regardless of class. Tag, usually played outside with one player being it and chasing down the other player. Hide and seek, where the children hide around and a chosen player tries to find them. Marbles, played inside where players try and knock out as many of their opponent's marbles from a circle. Dreidel, usually played during the holidays where children will spin a four-sided dreidel, gambling chocolates based on the result. Journey, where children will fold boats out of waxed paper and send them down currents. Winner is whoever's boat went furthest without sinking. Blind Man's Bluff, similar to Tag, but the person who's it is blindfolded and spun around before trying to catch someone. Shadow Puppets. Played indoors, children will make various shapes using the shadows cast from a lamp or candle and come up with stories to go with it. Parkour. While certainly not the safest pastime, more reckless children often have a fun time taking advantage of the vertical nature of Petrichor's architecture to climb and jump off of. For day 170, the prompt was, describe a character or entity who is much more powerful than they are perceived in your world. How so? Probably the Great writes, billions, billions underneath. The Khazarah of Kamar are numerous, numbering in the upper millions, perhaps even billions. The Khazarah are still, despite this fact, looked down on. The average man hears about how the Khazarah are not taxed by the Chaldathan government and about their almost invisible cooperation in the warfront. After all, you always hear about dwarven weapons that support the warfront. At least that gives the dwarves a right to lesser and sometimes non-existent taxation. And while the Khazarah are strong, despite these beliefs, a separate faction of them receives the same doubt and yet is far more dangerous. The traitor brood. The Trader Brood was once part of the ancient Khazarah government, the greater empire of Hair. After becoming separate during the Khazarah's migration to Kamar, the Trader Brood vanished for thousands of years. The rest of Khazarah kinds assumed them to be dead. After the Work War began and the forces of Murakane made their appearance, strange rumors began circulating amongst Kaldathan soldiers that Khazarah had been seen in no man's land dragging away the dead and dying. Screams, begging to be saved as the silhouettes of bugfolk rested against the fires of war in the distance. These rumors spread to Mazdun Nak, and the Brood Queen became curious beyond reason. It wasn't until 12 years ago that Khazarah forces were actively deployed on the warfront by the Brood Queen. The average soldier assumes that these insect infantry are just that, soldiers. The true purpose of these Khazarah is to identify any presence of the Trader Brood. While the higher-ups of the Kaldathan government are aware of the possibility that the Trader Brood might exist, to keep panic among civilians low and to fulfill the wishes of the Brood Queen, the alleged existence of the Trader Brood is kept silent. If the Trader Brood was real, and if it had a leader, the Khazarah point to the first Khazarah to ever lay eyes on her. Her is the name of the Khazarah goddess who's allegedly created their lineage, Oxskek. Now, we exist any kind of allegedness about the Trader Brood. The Trader Brood is real, it is dangerous, and its numbers far outreach those of any other faction combined. The traitorous brood was infected with the miasma, a brutal corruption on normal men, but with the artificial construction of the Khazarah, they are far worse for wear than even the most grotesque of Murakanians. Their corruption keeps them fed and multiplying. They do not die, yet the miasma had not taken their ability to give birth. An undying legion of endless swarms of flesh-eating scarabs the size of a dog, feral and uncoordinated. Or are they? I think Khazarah was, I think, correct spread when the great, and I think I did it right every time. I actually have to, like, not look at the full word when I say it, because otherwise my brain really wants to pronounce the G, but this is really fun. I like your bug people a lot. We're getting a lot of bug people today, actually. Moths and bugs and lots of cool insectoid things, which I just love, honestly. Nugget writes, weak, pathetic, fragile Victor Cogwin. And this is an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. Poor Victor Cogwin. Looked down upon no matter the circle he's in. He's weak, he's frail, his parents expected him to die in infancy, and he just doesn't have the stomach for the family business. The one strength he has is his wit, but what is that worth when no one takes you seriously? When you are expelled from university, when half of your inventions either fail or get stolen, when your entire scientific view of the world is nothing more than comedy to the gods, and he only grew more pathetic around the gods, if he's already barely respected by his fellow humans, how do you think deities far above him see him? Nothing. They don't. They see him as entertaining at best. With that strange little invention and his aforementioned commitment to denying what's right in front of him, they see him as fragile, short-lived, a simple pet the disgraced runt of a god Aurelius keeps around as decoration for them to hunt for sport because of Aurelius's idiotic attachment. Perhaps this is why no one ever thought anything more of him. Unbeknownst to even Victor, he is the reincarnation of the primordial god Time. After all, his magic was something he was ashamed of, something that would get him killed if anyone found out. He hid his magic from the moment he realized it was there, pushing it so far down, even he doesn't realize it's still alive. If he fully came into his power, he'd be one of the three most powerful entities in the entire cosmos. But that doesn't matter to him. He'll keep repressing it until he can't any longer, but even someone as stubborn as Victor is bound to crack at some point. For day 172, the prompt was, what is an example of a scientific investigation of a certain topic in your world? And this one came from Percival the Great in the Discord and on TikTok. Percival the Great wrote, weirds are weird. As one might recall, in a previous document, Built Together Day 162, mentioned during the scientific investigations of the stag monster group, they are in possession of something called a weird. This is the name Rhaonian scientists have given to what one might call the soul of a stag. The name weird comes from ancient human myth from the time before the bleak shore ever made its appearance 1,000 or so years ago, but that too is a story for another day. Other monsters, too, have been seen to be in possession of a weird, but we're here to talk about weirds in relation to stags. The following messages are from the journal of Rhaonian scientist Ivan Pros. Year 12 of Sovereignty, 12th of Akka. Log 1. I have been tasked by none other than the Lord Cross to investigate the nature of weirds. By my testing and that of my associates, by all accounts, a weird seems to be very similar to a mortal's soul, although still different in several ways. I need more time to specify any further. Year 12 of Sovereignty, 33rd of Akka. Log 2. Well, we're rounding up on the end of the quarter, and my team and I have some sizable results thus far. Weirds can only be detected within contained environments, as both their near transparency and white coloring make them rather impossible to perceive in the blizzards they manifest in. The environment we've concocted for our specimen utilizes the color black to ensure that the weird remains visible at all times. As for the containment procedures, when unwatched, all walls are to be heated via electricity to around room temperature, while air conditioning keeps the center of the room around the temperatures that weirds are most comfortable with. As for results, the specimen we've been testing has given us great headways into the knowledge of the nature of souls as a whole. My report will be finished tomorrow. Year 12 of Sovereignty, 34th of Akka. Log 3. Weirds are without a doubt a type of soul, which means that there are now, without a doubt, different types of souls. Whether or not there is a difference between that of different lineages or just between mortals and monsters, I do not yet know. Either way, weirds are different in a way that they can sustain themselves in the mortal realm. In that sense, a weird is not all too dissimilar from an elemental spirit. Before, however, unlike an elemental spirit, they can freely move around in physical space. Also, unlike the souls of mortals or the spirits of elementals, a weird contains absolutely zero capacity for causing celestial corruption. If we can somehow find a way to bind a weird to a machine instead of an elemental spirit, the applications of such a thing could end wars. We could loose an unkillable machine against our foes that will not turn on us. The very thing keeping us from truly deploying automated troops en masse could be nullified. Year 15 of Sovereignty, 41st of Thurn. Log 147. After 3 years, I think I've done it. I believe with 100% confidence that we can bind a weird to a weird complex. I will begin to test at the earliest opportunity with the Lord Cross's permission, of course. Year 20 of Sovereignty, 12th of Akka. 8. 8 years I have served His Majesty Cross. I have assured him time and time again that the weird is ready for the test, that it is cooperating better than a dog at my every request. I could command it to roll over if it wasn't a floating orb. It is obedient to a T. If the Lord Cross won't see past the non-existent risk, then I will have to show him myself. My team, they refuse to see it through. They are too obedient to His Majesty. Fine, it's fine. I can do this without them. 2 days after this journal entry, the alarms at the research station were sounded. All personnel were found disemboweled, and large tracks led away from the site towards an active blizzard. The white has remained hidden to this day. This really reads like a SCP entry, actually, Predwin. You did a really good job with this one. I like the additional mystery of what happened. We all know things went poorly, but why? The final day for this Shoutout Saturday is day 173, and the prompt for that day was, what materials are typically found in building construction? And this comes from Nukes in the Discord. Probably the Great writes, in the world of turmoil, the tides of war ebb and flow like water. Pushes can be successful and buildings can be lost in minutes. On the other hand, without a bunker of your own, you can't hold ground that you take. On the beach of bodies, there are no trees to harvest for rudimentary structures, nor easy access to stone for on-site concrete making. All resources must be imported from outside the warfront. Of course, soldiers in wars, even in real life, obviously must rely on outside assistance for resources, but everything on the beach is imported. Campfire wood, drinkable water, and of course, building materials. Concrete is heavy, even when separated between wet and dry ingredients. Steel rebar even more so. And such the convoys that can make it carry very few resources. Steam crawlers are the only things capable of traversing the sands of the beach, and with leg-based movement, their joints can only handle so much weight. Caldetha needed a lightweight, durable material capable of being deployed quickly and readily. Enter Gideon Rotbrand. Gideon's first ever invention was a composite material named Quick. Very clever. Quick is made entirely of concrete, but it's magic concrete. Truly innovative. Quick is light, weighing about 5 pounds per cubic meter, and as its name suggests, it hardens very quickly. By utilizing rune magic, a soldier can instantly dry up to 30 cubic meters of Quick, whereas concrete takes 20 to 30 days to reach full strength. As with the auto-stitch runes, Quick runes are also mass-produced by burning the rune's design into a sheet of wood. These runes, unlike those of the auto-stitch, the Sholem, Lagas, Proctor, Erevis, Arcane Circle, can be small enough to carry around. While the auto-stitch needs to be as big as the person it is healing, 5 to 20 feet, lineage depending, the Quick rune can be as small as the palm of someone's hand. Quick was an immense help on the warfront all the way until the forces of death breached the bulkhead. Magic concrete. Nice. This is a fun. This is maybe the most interesting one we got for this prompt. To be fair, a lot of building materials are not that interesting. Mine were basically just the specific special types of trees in Atovia, and that was about it. For day 174, the prompt was, what is an odd leisure activity in your world, i.e. a barbecue, a game night, going to a bar, etc.? Probably the Great writes, games fit for a king. The Eternians, infinite, uncaring, omnipotent, and very, very bored. To enjoy themselves, Eternians do all sorts of things. More intimate activities are both impossible and alien to them, so the only fun activities they have are based largely around either gambling or intellectual adventures like board games. The former is much more enjoyable to them than the latter, and so they've created a very fun game based around their omniscient vision. The subject? who's about to die. The Eternians' ability to see everything all at once allows them to spy on their orcish forces constantly, and, if they're bored, place bets on which orc will die first. Eternians don't use currency in their bets, instead transferring power between one another like currency, or by offering favors. Eternians get very emotional when their orc loses, sometimes decimating a room or two in their citadel out of anger before composing themselves. Eternians, I believe, Predwin said, are his BBEG, like the worst of the worst in the setting. It's interesting. I don't know much about them yet. So I'm excited to learn more as we do more Shoutout Saturdays and I read more of his stuff in the Discord. Nugget posts The Church of the Frenzied. This is an entry in Petrichor. It's believed that an altered perception of reality is a result of possession by the frenzied, as it allows you the privilege of seeing the world through its eyes. Mental illness, which produces hallucinations, are rare gifts given to only its favorite humans, but not all of its followers can be so lucky. It is a common leisure, almost religious activity for affiliates of the frenzied to partake in various mind-altering substances and drugs to invoke a similar sense of possession by the frenzied. Common drugs are alcohol, marijuana, and shrooms, although many still prefer harder substances. The less in touch with reality you are, the more the frenzied cradles you in its arms, so they say, anyway. This sounds like, what is the eye thing from Elden Ring? It's giving a similar idea. The madness entity in Elden Ring, and this gives me a similar idea, maybe without all the yellow lightning, though. For day 175, the prompt was, what grand construct exists in your world and what is its purpose? This comes from Aris in the Discord, and he also has a TikTok. Aris, the 5 Towers of Transience, or the Void. The 5 Towers of Transience is a bundle of constructs within the lower abyssal sequence of Sakar, specifically in the Fields of Dethroned Gods, appearing as 5 massive, jagged towers rocketing into the sky. Each tower is placed around each other in a circular pattern, with 2 being the shortest, 2 being larger, and 1 taller than the rest. In the center of the circle of towers is a void focus, keeping the area active while shooting a bright purple beacon up into the sky. These towers were built in honor of 5 gods. Both the gods and the towers were then consumed by the void after it got curious. Each tower has a different appearance to it. The front left tower is the Tower of Light. It has a white and yellow coloring to it, with a rounded design. On each level of this tower, balconies can be seen overlooking the area, with the topmost balcony connecting to the front right tower, the Tower of Shadow. The Tower of Shadow has a more ghastly appearance. Its walls aren't even, and the tower seems twisted and morphed. Getting near it will snuff most, if not all, light sources. The center towers are the second largest of the bunch. The center left is the Tower of Death. It has a jagged appearance, each level bearing massive spikes and horns that bend upwards and away from the building. The topmost area of the tower has a spire, bearing the corpse of a felled god's bones. The center right is the Tower of Life. It is hexagonal in design, with each level being uncentered to form its balconies. Surrounding each level is a spell circle that shifts and sways endlessly. The bottommost circle glows a bright white color, while the topmost circle is a dark purple, and is by far the largest spell circle there. The tops of these 2 towers are also connected to each other. Finally, there is the largest tower, being nearly double the size of the center towers. This is the Tower of Twilight. This tower is built up of a collection of diamond-shaped rooms, all of which hover around each other, connecting and disconnecting at random. All of these towers contain various creatures controlled by their paradox. The paradox of death, life, and light all wish to shove the field deeper into the void, while the paradox of shadow wishes to raise it up higher to potentially escape. The paradox of twilight simply wishes to destroy the field, and with it themselves, hoping that they would stop the endless cycles, though, as they can't do much about it at this time, they simply lie and wait for the right opportunity to strike. Man, it's hard to even know what to say about this one. Aris, this just seems like really big cosmic level building stuff. Seems really interesting to me. I don't have much context as per usual with your stuff. I like little pieces coming together over time, but it's going to take me a while still. Predwin the Great writes Interloper 1, The Nexus. This is a different world for Predwin the Great than Rust and Blood, called Guild. Aether, NIB. Banishment Ritual. Upon manifestation and discovery of Interloper 1, a team of 20 or more armed collaboratives, consisting of no more than 2 scribes, no less than 6 weavers, and no more than 4 vanguards, are to be immediately sent to unearth the correct threat of the Nexus. If risks are discovered to be above Orichalcum tier, the collaboratives are to immediately enact the following ritual. The Nexus is to be appeased by completing various trials on each floor. The information specifically regarding trials and that of the Nexus itself are difficult to archive properly, as both written information and memories of said information become foggy or outright lost as the scribe descends the Nexus. Collaborator teams are to be trained to the requisites as written in the Nexus C&E grimoire as to properly appease the Nexus for proper information gathering. Under no circumstance should undertrained collaborators be sent into the Nexus as to avoid adamantine tier danger. Upon completion of the Nexus trials, all Rift touched are to make sizable efforts to escape before Rift closure. Losses are acceptable, failure is not. As mentioned previously, each floor has a trial that must be completed to ascend to the next floor of the tower. These trials cannot be fully documented in either form or function, as all written notes and memories regarding such information is almost completely erased from pages and minds alike. However, any documentation originating from within the Nexus distinctly lacks this decaying property. All information from the bookshelves in the Nexus collected by collaboratives are to be compiled mid-delve by the team's scribes for archival upon return. Appearance. Interloper 1. The Nexus appears to be a 20-story tall stone tower vaguely shaped like a greatsword. The stone of the tower is comprised of mundane limestone and similarly boring oak wood supports and flooring. The interior of the Nexus often does not match that of the outside, often being noticeably shorter or taller than the outer appearance would suggest, with some floors within the tower extending great distances not possible given the tower's outer dimensions both vertically and horizontally. The inside of the tower is often littered with what can only be described as treasure, used by the Nexus to coax collaboratives deeper inside. Along with the aforementioned treasure within the Nexus, there are always at least 3 bookshelves containing information crucial to Guild's efforts in protecting Gythus. The uppermost floor of the tower has, thus far, remained the same over the course of all manifestations of Interloper 1. This floor is also referred to as the Crown. The Crown is, according to the only allowed measurements of the Nexus, a 20 by 20 foot square platform suspended above an endless sea of black fluid not visible from ground level. In the center of the platform there is a large open book positioned on a lectern. This tome is believed to be the mind of the Nexus, as upon its closure, the rift associated with the tower will begin collapsing rapidly. As it breaks down, the stem connecting it to Gythus now severed, the inky void of black liquid begins seeping through the descending floors of the Nexus. Any collaborators that make contact with the liquid are inflicted with extremely painful necrotic rashes that overtake their body in seconds and leave them writhing in agony for minutes. 1,000 infinities take a deep breath and exhale destruction. I'm excited to learn more about this guild setting. I think this is really interesting. A very different direction than Rust and Blood. I like this so far, probably great. I think you got something good that you're cooking up. Nugget writes The Grand Arc Cathedral, an entry in Petrichor. Even with the chronic downpour and usual fog restricting visibility, it's hard to miss the main church. The tallest point in the entire city by a considerable margin, the Grand Arc Cathedral towers over the entirety of Petrichor, and with lights always being in the windows, it's clearly visible no matter where you are. Regardless of whether you're a high roller or living in the slums, you will always be able to look up and see the cathedral. Walking up the stairs and heavy gates, you already feel a sense of dread as you approach. Looking up, you see the details carved into the very stone walls making up the building staring directly back at you even without eyes. No wonder you feel so watched. And so small, too. Next to the gods, incomprehensible and Lovecraftian in nature, you are nothing, and the cathedral does well to make sure you feel as such. Walking inside does little to help your sense of vertigo. You look up at the ceiling, resting several stories above you with ornate paintings depicting unfamiliar scenes, held up with giant stone pillars. Lining the walls are artificial waterfalls and stained glass windows with similar artistic and religious imagery, casting colorful light onto the cold marble floors below you. Walking further in, the smell of incense fills your nose along with the scent of something strangely metallic that makes you feel slightly sick. The hall is lined with benches, some people already sitting in quiet prayer. You are guided to the end of the hall where you stare up at 4 giant statues depicting strangely ethereal and cloaked figures with various masks and odd limbs, crying and weeping towards the sky in agony and grief as water pours around them. The gods, you assume. After all, it's those tears that cause the rain. Somewhere above you was where the council meets to discuss new ways to ignore the Third Estate, and even higher was where the church heads spent most of their time. When was the last time they were seen in public? And why aren't they doing anything about the council? It seems even the church is prone to ignoring the problems of the people they're meant to govern by locking themselves safely away where they cannot see. There is a truly stunning circular stained glass window taking up most of the far wall, framing the entire cathedral in strange light. You take a moment to stand there, closing your eyes and taking in the feeling of the display being projected on your face. You hear the bell tower ringing the hour ominously from somewhere else in the cathedral, piercing the entire city with their toll. You open your eyes and rest them on the source of that metallic smell from earlier. The prayer altar underneath the stained glass, between the stone depictions of the gods, complete with various symbols and trinkets associated with each, in the center of which was a simple and elegant fountain basin dispensing what was unmistakably blood. Whose blood is unknown. You know part of the process of swearing into the council or taking over as a church head involves slicing your hand and pouring the blood into the basin, likely as a show of dedication to the gods. But there's far too much inside of the basin to only be from that. Even if it was from only the nobles, it isn't enough to make up for what they've done. A revolution is on the horizon.
The blood of the aristocracy will overflow the basin, and when it does, Petrichor will gladly partake in communion.
Nugget, you did a really good job evoking like the imagery of this cathedral and this place. I felt like I was there. This is maybe some of the best general description of an environment we've had so far. I felt like this was really solid. For day 176, the prompt was describe the government of a specific city or nation where power is highly imbalanced. Probably the Great writes, the power of the people, and this is an entry in Rust and Blood, which is most of what we've seen before. Caldatha needs soldiers. Most of those soldiers came from the Watchers Peninsula, until less than a quarter ago. The Watchers Peninsula, for the longest time, was governed by a man completely devoted to the Caldethi royalty. This man was Aurora Thar of House Damar, and until his death, the peninsula yielded to the demands of its king. 3/4 of all soldiers were drafted from the peninsula, and 2/3 of those men and women died in their first week on the war front. For decades, countless thousands had been taken from picket fences to barbed wire and rot. All until 36 days ago, after Aurora's son, Amar, took control of the peninsula following his father's death. Although Aurora had died several years ago, Amar made careful preparations for his declaration of sovereignty. Amar's actions completely halted the stream of troops to the beach of bodies. He had planned for Caldatha to attempt negotiations, which he would have made great strides towards, but instead, a coward took an opportunity to destroy all the efforts of Caldatha over the course of the war. General Orthus Ilirwin, who was mentioned in Build Together Day 146, in his corrupt allegiance with the forces of death, used his position of power to divert forces meant for the bulkhead to correct the actions of the peninsula. Ilirwin's actions, disguised as helping Kamar with a short-term engagement against the peninsula, allowed the forces of death to overrun and destroy the bulkhead, Kamar's most important line of defense. With the bulkhead gone, Murricanians, Orcs, and Korgans all marched into the lower state of Caldatha and completely took over the region. Hundreds of thousands died from miasmic corruption, all because one man wanted to save his citizens from pointless deaths.
Kindness is never, ever rewarded, mortal.
Nugget writes, the government structure of Petrichor, an entry in Petrichor. Petrichor's government is a combination of an oligarchy and a theocracy. The church heads are the highest position of power in Petrichor, being in charge of the entire church. They work similar to the Pope, only there's 4 of them, one for each god. Theoretically, any member of the clergy could become a church head if one needs to be replaced, although since the decision of who takes over is made by high-ranking members of the church personally chosen by said church heads, it's usually going to be one of them. Additionally, the church heads could veto the choice if half or more of them agree. The responsibilities of the church heads mostly lie in the clergy. They promote ideals held by their gods, provide spiritual guidance, and oversee the happenings of the church. It's also they who have the most power in terms of what happens within the city. They're the ones that decide what laws or changes need to be made before handing it off to the council, and then later decide if they want to use what the council decided. They are the only ones with power over the council, the only people they'd fear, but yet they often do nothing to prevent their actions. The council is the other major power in Petrichor, second only to the church heads. It is composed of the heads of a number of noble families. The house head is the member tasked with representing their entire family, and as such is always referred to by last name in formal settings. The title of house head is passed down by seniority, with a minimum age of 18, and while not required, they often receive heavy education on political sciences and economics. It's the council's responsibility to discuss business, politics, and law, usually based on the instructions given by the church heads. Nobles are aristocratic families non associated with the church, but given a noble title by the church heads. Every council member is a noble, but not all nobles are council members. Every noble is an aristocrat, but not every aristocrat is a noble. Only the council has direct influence over politics, but most members of the second estate rub elbows with one another, so it isn't uncommon for general aristocracy to still have a lot of say over the political structure of the city. Additionally, Petrichor is divided up into 3 estates. The clergy is the first estate, the aristocracy is the second estate, and everybody else is part of the third estate. Only the first and second estate have any weight in the government. The third estate, despite making up 95% of Petrichor's population, have 0 say in what happens to them. No wonder the people are becoming angry. Well, this is great, Nugget. I feel like I finally have a little bit more context for when you say things about the different estates. That's going to help me out a lot in reading in the future. I mean, not necessarily with reading, but with some understanding of what it is that you're writing about. Awesome. For day 177, the prompt was, what are everyday adhesives like, / how are they made? Glue, tape, etc. This was from Nukes in the Discord. Carhop writes, Endora's adhesive. Of the many applications the resourceful people of Restris have found for the multitudinous fungi inhabiting their world, Endorus adhesive may just be the most commonly used. Made by mixing the melted resin of specified trees with animal fat, charcoal, and beard lichen, the stuff has a staunch odor of burnt meat and smoked herbs, but has tremendous staying power, flexibility, and is naturally hydrophobic. Its applications are numerous, including fletching, seam sealing, cobbling, ship repairing, construction, and so on. Protections against fire do need to be made when handling the adhesive, as it is highly flammable and produces long-lasting flames. Due to this property, many adventurers keep a chunk of the adhesive in their packs to be used as a fire starter or emergency torch. The adhesive derives its nickname shroom goo from the trees which produce the resin and charcoal used in its creation. Though most any resin can be turned into a sort of adhesive, Endorus adhesive is made specifically from trees which share a symbiotic relationship with endophytic fungi that bloom into saprophytic fruiting bodies once resin begins to be produced. The most notable species of tree and fungi which share this relationship are pitchbark pines and the bloodwort fungus. In the tradition of the Verlunde Urush, the tree's resin and the fungus's crimson guttation droplets are collected before the wood and mushrooms are turned into charcoal in earthen mounds. Great care is taken by the wild elves to leave enough of the pine and fungus to grow back without depleting the forest. Unfortunately, the same arboreal care cannot be attributed to some of the pioneers and industrialists in the Orowacho territory who seem intent on stripping the land near barren. This has caused much conflict between local Urush and the frontier town of Sidrista. This is definitely the most unique submission Carhop we got for this prompt. I like this one a lot. This is super cool. Clearly, you know a lot more about fungus than the rest of us in the server, I think, which is awesome. I am curious about some of these words. I might have to go and do some research or something on my own time to maybe understand a little bit more of what's going on, but I like it. For day 178, the prompt was, what is a common grift that most people know in your world, but is still lucrative? Probably the Great writes, dead men walking. War changes. It is not a stagnant, sessile thing that refuses to adapt. The moment the children of Ragash arrived on Kamar, one of the stakes in life's coffin was driven deep. With the Murricanians on the warfront, compassion gets people killed, and dead people multiply like bacteria. The dead men. Zombies, ghouls, sundered, whatever you call them, they all start as one kind of foe, the dead men. Dead men are those unfortunate enough to be wounded in war, left in no man's land to bleed out slowly, if they're lucky. No, more often a fate is to be inflicted with the miasma, and be forced with a decision, to serve or to resist. Do you join the children of Ragash willingly, or resist the pull of the writhing mountain until your mind is consumed? Most soldiers choose the latter, to die with their dignity intact and finally rest. They will not rest. They will never sleep again. The dead men are soldiers who have recently become undead by refusing the call of Ragash. They walk like man, cry for help like man, and hold weapons like man. They look like man or elf or dwarf, but they are husks, shambling towards their bunkers, calling out for help, asking their fellow soldiers to lift them and bring them to safety. Please, it's Arthur, it's me, help! Lies, concocted by an eldritch intelligence that wants to see the world burn. They do not falter as warning shots land near their feet, nor slow down as dozens of flashlights shine on them in the night. You have to see past their lies. You are responsible for keeping the sleeping safe. You need to shoot this man before you can see if he's even remotely wounded. It isn't a risk worth taking. It isn't worth it. It isn't worth it. Posters with this message above a picture of a wounded man are commonly found in Caldatha bunker complexes. Propaganda to guide soldiers into making the right choice and gunning down their fellows that travel alone in the night. Wounded people, people asking for help in this cruel, dark place. Will you really shoot her? She sounds so scared, so real. No magics could truly replicate a person so perfectly, could they? If you just let her get close enough to inspect to see if she lets off purple fumes, then you could be certain. You wouldn't kill an innocent person, someone who needs help. They need your help. Show some kindness. She gets closer, 4 arm lengths away now, and you turn on your flashlight. You look at her, terror in your eyes. Her eyes are cold, foggy. Her breath comes out as a dense purple haze and her lips are bitten off. She stares at you, and without moving her mouth in the slightest, asks for help one last time. Kindness is weakness. Kindness is never, ever rewarded. Very spooky, Predwin. You're getting this eldritch stuff down really well. This last paragraph confused me a little bit, but I think I read it weird. I'm going to read it back to myself at some point and try and properly parse when we start describing this event to ourselves. But I thought this was really interesting. I think you did a really good job, as usual, with the eldritch aspect of this coming through really well. Nugget writes, Edward and Thaddeus' schemes. An entry in Petrichor. Some years back, you may have found yourself walking around after some afternoon shopping and see a young street musician playing the violin. He couldn't be any older than 15, you'd wager, but his talent was far beyond his age. Found yourself stuck there, losing track of time, entranced by the boy's singing. You put some spare coins in his violin case, and he gives you a grateful nod before you walk away, and it's only when you're out of earshot you realize that your pockets are far lighter than they should be. After the orphanage flooded, see day 166, Thaddeus and Edward ran away, deciding they were better off on their own rather than waiting for help that would never show. At first they simply begged for food and scraps, being young and pathetic enough that people were inclined to help them, but as years went on, this became less reliable, so they began actively scamming people. They had many schemes to scrounge money and food, so no one thing was too overdone to raise suspicion. However, one of their thought out ones came from Edward's magic continuing to develop in his voice. Realizing this could be of help, he began learning hypnotism and working it into his songs. From there, he performed on the streets, usually in wealthier neighborhoods to screw the rich, and put them in a state where they're so enraptured with him, Thaddeus could walk between the crowd to pickpocket them, with no one being any the wiser. Of course, this scam is no longer relevant, seeing as Edward has since married into a noble family and has no need to scam people to afford food, and Thaddeus similarly now works at a local bar. Although that being said, be careful about how much you say. The bartender's always listening in, and you never know what he'll do with the information you give while drunk. For day 179, the prompt was, what's an example of a deity or powerful creature dying in your world? What events were caused by this passing? And this one comes from MycoMan in Discord and on TikTok. Penguin the Great writes, decaying, dying, writhing. The death of Nolarod shook the world. A celestial, one of the 12 great ones, dead. There was no glorious bloodshed nor brutal maiming, only instant, permanent, uncaring blackness. Pieces of its mind scattered like seeds in the wind, landing mostly in the bombed-out husk of Themistria, now known as Grilla. From there its carcass grew sentience, and knew only rage and hate. It pushed away all who came near it, sending forth the few creatures that survived the bombings conducted by the ancient Khazarah. In the south, fragments of its mind became the Eternals, who hunger for the power they previously wielded. They built armies of clone soldiers, the Orcs, and made vassals out of the Murracanians to find their shattered psyche and become whole once more. Nolorod's will spread prejudice throughout Remexia, infecting them with disgust and vanity, and its bleeding heart landed in Kamar, trying to mend itself by siphoning as much magic as it could from the area, leaving the continent's inhabitants void of the lifeblood of turmoil, the arcane. And so, still, in its death, Nolorod lives on as the source of everything, the source of turmoil. Nice, okay, we got a little bit of a creation myth almost. Not I guess not quite a creation myth, but close to it, the inception myth of your world, Predwin. For day 180, the prompt was, what's a unique way to form a promise or contract with someone in your world, i.e. a pinky promise that's legally binding? This comes from MycoMan in the Discord and on TikTok. Percival the Great writes, pacts with cats. Grala would not be the same without the Nyan caravans. These cat folk, wherever they're from, have made great strides to unite Grala in trade, but they don't do it for free. When the Nyan lord met with Sobrek, the two men agreed on a term most others would never even begin to consider. The Nyan, at their first meeting with the Kartoff, became an integral part of their entire society and joined the ranks of their highest officials. In merely a week, the people of Kartoff had to come to terms with the fact that decisions about their society will be influenced by people that came out of nowhere. For a time, the people of Havenhold, and by extension the Kartoff as a whole, were very cautious of these felines, but as time went on and on, these aren't the Kartoff and the Nyan, only a unified people. The Kartoff natives and the catfolk became one people, united in a world where kindness is weakness, and they made it strength. Well, this is wholesome, Predwin. That's nice. Carhop writes, Vow Weave. Though many Kori settlements lack a structured government, opting instead to make important decisions by communal committee, it has been a tradition among the diaspora to seal binding vows and promises by exchanging cords of dyed spider silk and interweave these into their own hair. This rite, known as a vow weave, is typically reserved for marriage ceremonies, religious pledges, and vows between battlekin. See notes on warfare in this article. The exchange is performed in front of 4 communally appointed leaders who call upon the magics of the 4 moons to seal these bonds. The blessing serves not to only create an arcane longevity in the braided silk cords, but also to punish any who break their vows, igniting an offender in moonfire, which burns until no life remains in the body. A vow weave can only be undone by cutting the silk cords with a pair of opaline and obsidian shears bathed in mineral-rich springs, while runes of power are spoken over them by the elder representing the shattered brother. After use, these shears are consumed in moonfire. As such, the Kori view liars and cheats with high enmity and oft refrain from making pledges to outsiders even within the diaspora. Carhop, I feel like you're really good at making really interesting or wacky rituals that sound like they're out of our own mythology, like here on Earth. It's really, really good. This is something I'm just not very good at. But my magic system is too hard of a magic system to make this work too often. But I need to do this kind of thing for more mythology of Atovia. This is good. I'm getting inspired. Nugget writes, sealed in blood, an entry in petrichor. Now repeat after me. The words the decayed church head. It was Ambrose's 18th birthday, and the day he was sworn into the council in the absence of the rest of his family. He sat in the middle of the grand dark cathedral, directly in front of the sacred basin of blood of those who came before him and the small shot glass that he had used to drink a portion of it just moments ago. He could still feel the metallic taste burning his tongue. He was dressed in extremely ornate ceremonial clothing for the event, and he could feel the eyes of everyone in the room waiting for what comes next. He was just handed an equally ornate dagger, as he repeated line by line what the church head had told him. I, Ambrosia John Lockhart, do swear on my blood to dedicate my entire being to the church, to the gods, and to the people of Petrichor. From now until my death, I vow to uphold my name and house and use it to bring the city up higher. May my noble blood remember what time may forget. After he finished, he brought his hand over the basin and sliced his palm cleanly with the dagger, spilling and squeezing his blood into the basin below. Cheers rang out from the crowd welcoming the newest member of the council, and the church heads brought over a piece of paper, a contract. Ambrose took his still bloody hand and dragged it over the bottom of the page, covering his signature with crimson. While not always the case, many more serious contracts in Petrichor, such as being sworn into a high position of power, require being literally sealed in blood. It's unknown why this is the case, but perhaps it's fortunate no one has yet found out. Nice little combo piece of a bit of narrative and then a bit of just general exposition. Cool and gross. For our last submission of this Shoutout Saturday, we have MycoMan, who writes, it's almost my time. I'm sorry, but I'm getting too old for this now. My job is one that's needed, but my bones are frail. I've almost fully destroyed my legs, just to keep going. I can still see bone fragments, fading out of sight as I make them into energy to use. I'm a dried well, and I'm sorry. I'm leaving this note for Anorak. I hope he finds it first, and that he understands this had to be done. I have little power left, and I feel that the Dawn Guard have been helping too much. I could just tell I'm no longer supposed to live, James. Yes, I know your dead name. I'm granting the rest of my power to the Dawn Guard. I simply believe I've made enough realms that they could destroy a few without it being an issue. Some who learn shall miss home, yes, but they have to understand, don't they? This isn't an easy thing to do. Please, tell my children of my passing. Let them know their father isn't dying just because. Tell them how proud I am of them for learning to shape their own homes. My whole life, I've been focused on making more realms, helping gods learn to affect their own, and I never thought to see them before now. Give the ones you can a hug for me. Tell the Dawn Guard to not waste effort trying to make any new realms. I've made ones even you hadn't found yet, after all. Anyways, ta-ta, friend. P.S. We saw you in the beginning, even though you thought you were being sneaky. I'm holding this note still, even as I copy it into journal number 27 of my collection. I found it near his body, which I've handled for now. I'm worried of what might happen to him if he's left here in the outscape. I don't know what happens when a god passes. I hope wherever or whatever he's doing, he feels less stress. I'm unsure what to do with it, and only one or two thoughts come to mind, which are both rather dire. The Dawn Guard have already been informed of their increase in their capabilities. I'm meant to meet with them to discuss their plans in deciding which realms are worthy of using as ammunition, as they call it. I've arrived to the home of the Dawn Guard. They're so far in the outscape that I've seen a few realms I've never been to. Looks like old Ernie was right about ones I haven't discovered yet. I'm going to speak with them now. I hope to learn more about them as we commune. Well, I've learned. There are only 10 Dawn Guard, one for each of Airnor's hands. They each have a staff, slightly unique in design. According to Goyam, the fourth hand, and one of 3 I actually saw within their abode, their staff is meant to represent what realm they hail from. Their bodies are rather interesting. It was explained to me that they gave up part of their soul when they gain Airnor as a patron. It changes them all to look rather similar, only differing in size based on their species. They all appear malnourished. They all have a mundane tone of gray for their skin. None of them have noses or ears, simply being replaced by holes that let them breathe and hear. Only one of the 3 I met had hair. They all wore the same robe, colored a deeper gray than their skin, fading to orange near the bottom. His favorite color. I've told them I have the body. They said they knew exactly where to put it and what should be done with it. I'll mention that when they spoke. They didn't appear to be in mourning. They were quite resolved. It seems that during the partial soul-removing process, they also become closer to an automaton than a human. Strange. I've been wondering why these were the limits to Airnor's pact. Why did these need to be done? I asked Sormala, one of the 2 Dawn Guard yet to be mentioned thus far. She told me that the power they have is too great to be wielded by someone that's held back by emotions. I personally disagree. I also learned that they don't exactly consume power from Airnor to be a warlock for him, but they also do. A section of his power is given, letting them manipulate the realms to a certain extent. To cast powerful magic, they must destroy a realm in the process. It made me think of what spells would be considered powerful magic. Either way, although they can't grieve for him, I hope that these beings manage to do without him. I don't know if I swear I've heard about the Dawn Guard from you, Michael, before, but I hadn't heard anything really substantial at all. This is super interesting. I like that you've really leaned in at this point to Anorak's perspective. Before it was like you were writing and you were like, oh, okay, this is like what Anorak is doing, but now we've really leaned into like this is like his journal entries and stuff, what I think is super fun. I mean, you're writing a whole like narrative sequence, and like at some point you would have a book's worth of Anorak's workings, which I think would be super cool. An hour and a half of lore from just 4 weeks. That's pretty crazy, actually. Thank you, everyone, like always, for submitting your Shoutout Saturday submissions. Again, I can't stress this enough. If you really want to have your own thing read here, then like come to our Discord. The link is always in the description. Submit a build together from the daily prompt in the build together forum and tag it to Shoutout Saturday, and it'll get read here. Now, in the future, if things get really crazy, like right now, my cap I think is maybe 7,000, 8,000 words to be read in a week. It's a lot, but I think I can manage that. If we start going up past that, we might have to start doing selection or maybe a big old queue of people or something. But for the moment, if you go and you post some writing, it's going to be read for sure. So thank you so much for watching. This was an awesome collaborative effort by the community. Have a wonderful Saturday or whatever day it is that you're watching this. Goodbye.
Hey.